Hey everybody, it's Brian Asbury, and I just wanted to welcome you to today's episode. If you could, like today's episode, hit that subscribe button, and let's continue to grow the developmentally speaking brand.
Today, my guest is world travel professional wrestler, HWA Cruiserweight Champion, Tag Team Champion, and WCW Hardcore Champion, Shannon Moore. Shannon, how's it going?
What's up, dude? Glad you have me on here finally. I know it's been a struggle, man. Just timing. Dude, I tell you what, man. I need about 8 more hours in the day to accomplish everything that I want to accomplish.
People are busy. I get it. I fully understand. I appreciate you making the time today to come on and talk a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. What made you want to get into professional wrestling? And I'm sure that you've been asked this question a million times, and I do apologize.
Yeah, man. Like I'm sure. Well, not everybody, but most people it's a dream. Um, there was two wrestlers I remember just whenever I was a kid because I come up in a I don't even want to say middle class, but dude, my dad, he worked 3 jobs, 4 jobs to provide for the family, until he was in a really bad car accident whenever I was 10. But whenever I was a kid, man, I just remember Hulk Hogan and Junkyard Dog sticking out to me. Obviously Hogan's energy was intense, and then you had Warrior too. Warrior was a big, just I didn't understand wrestling. I didn't watch it enough as a kid to really understand what it was, but the characters pulled me in. And I just remember Junkyard Dog, his energy, whenever he would come out, and I was like, man, that's pretty cool. And then Hogan, eat your vitamins. And then, he had the body that I wanted, Hogan had that, he was jacked and he was in the gym. Obviously I
Hmm.
was like, man, I want to be like him. I want to be big and strong and tough and fight and all that good stuff. But um, just as a kid, man, it just started as a dream and this vision as a kid.
What made you? At what point did you decide that this wasn't going to be just a dream that you were going to start pursuing professional wrestling?
Well, I mean, if you read, I don't know, if you Google me, it says that oh, Shannon Moore's a product of Matt and Jeff Hardy. He was trained by Matt and Jeff Hardy, and it's like that wasn't the case. We grew up in Cameron, North Carolina, in a small town, and me and Jeff, we were inseparable. We become really good friends, just best friends, at an early age because we went to the same middle school. And just they had a trampoline, and their dad had a video camera, and Jeff invited me over to, at that point it was TWF. It was whenever, we had the trampoline and we turned it into a little arena. So we just, I was with those guys, man, me, Matt, and Jeff, and Marty Garner, Champagne. We had a crew, TC Flexer, which is Trevor Lee's, or Trevor's dad that passed away. I'm sure you guys have heard that story through Trevor Lee if you're a wrestling fan or whatever. He talks about it a lot. But Trevor, his dad, was part of it, and we started doing what we were seeing on TV. Basically, we didn't know shit about pro wrestling or nothing other than what we seen on TV. And dude, I was so young too, man. At the time, I didn't even know what I was doing really. It's I knew I wanted to be a wrestler, but I literally probably weighed 100 pounds.
Hmm.
I was 9 years old. And it was brutal. Even being on the trampoline, just being so tiny and getting thrown around, I remember crying at times because, one time, Matt dropped me on the post 2 or 3 times because he botched a spot. And then I took a suplex and about broke my ribs. It'd be like grabbing your youngest kid and beating them up. That's pretty much what happened to me at the beginning, and but I loved it. It was oh man, this is the greatest thing ever. So that's kind of how the journey began. Just us goofing around on the trampolines, trying to, do what we seen on TV.
So during all this, did you go train anywhere else as it progressed, and then you started working outside?
No, we ended up with our own real wrestling ring, even though it was probably the shittiest ring in the universe. It was more like a half pipe skateboard ramp. I mean, it was completely like bowed in the middle because it was outdoors at Tracy Cadell's house, which is Trevor, his dad, his house. So Trevor was basically born into wrestling. Like he had no choice but to be a wrestler because he was a baby and we had him in the ring. Like I remember running lucha spots with Trevor whenever Trevor just started walking and convincing Trevor like to dive out between like the bottom rope in the ring, not the second rope, but like the bottom rope in the ring. Like he would shoot through out onto the mattresses that we would practice dives on and stuff. But yeah, we just had it outside at Trevor's house, and that's every Sunday, man. That was our all day thing, man. Go train and just try to get better.
How was your journey to WCW? How did that come about?
Um, so WCW, Matt and Jeff, they were going up and doing extra work for WWE, like 97, 98, somewhere in that ballpark. And I was trying to do work for WWE. Tom Pritchard actually, I sent a tape of a few matches with me and Jeff, the Willow Dynamo feud that I don't know if you've seen any of that footage or not from back in the day, but I sent it to Tom Pritchard, trying to get extra work too at WWE. And Tom was like, dude, your work's great. And like I've been up there a few times too, like Tony Gurria, like everybody treated me great, man.
Hmm.
Whenever I would go up there with Matt and Jeff every once in a while, like I wasn't going up every time they would go, but like if it was close, I'd go and just hang out and meet everybody. But Tom Pritchard, he's seen a tape of me and Jeff wrestling, and you know, he basically told me he's like, look, man, like WWF is a big man's world. Like you're literally, I mean, I was at that point, what, 15, 16, and he's like, you've got to put size on before you can ever come up here and work.
Hmm.
And like he was like, your work's good. He goes, like I could see you're gonna be a really good worker, but you're just not big enough. I was like, okay, well, same thing that I've heard my whole career up to that point was like, oh, you're never gonna make it because you're too small. But I was determined, man. I knew deep down, like, I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to go to high school, even though I graduated, like, barely. But I wanted to wrestle, man. I knew, like, in my heart, like, I was going to do whatever I needed to do. So I put my eyes on WCW, because the cruiserweight thing was starting to kick off there. You had Billy Kidman there, and I think Ray had just hit the scene, um, and some of the Lucha guys. I was like, all right, like I'm gonna shoot for WCW. And Lodi, he was one of our North Carolina boys, and he was down there. They were doing the flock, and he had been at the power plant. And I talked to Lodi about the power plant, and then Chris Canyon. I knew Matt and Jeff knew Chris Canyon because Chris Canyon was going up and doing spot work at WWF2 before he went to WCW. So they had met Chris, and I asked Matt. I was like, "Hey, man, like, what do you think about Chris Canyon? Do you think he's a pretty cool dude, or do you think he's just like majority of everybody in wrestling and just not gonna help somebody?" Or and Matt's like, "Nah, Chris seems like he's pretty cool." And I'd asked Lodi too, and Lodi was like, "Nah, Chris is great. Get a hold of him." So I called Chris, man, just taking a shot, like a long shot. And I'm like, hey, dude, like, I'm Shannon Moore. And by this point, too, I was out in Nashville doing Music City Wrestling. And, like, we were the Bad Street Boys out there, which was similar to what we ended up doing in
Hmm.
WCW. And I'd been out there for about a year, going out about every weekend doing Music City Wrestling. Like, that TV was broadcasted, like, pretty much nationwide. Like it wasn't just syndicated TV. Like there were certain areas like it would hit. It was weird because like it was on in North Carolina too on a channel, and like my teachers and stuff would watch it. So like they would pass me. I missed like 70 some days my senior year because I was on the road, and they still like they thought it was cool. They're like, dude, you're doing what you want to do. You're already successful at it. You're on TV. So like perception was like I'd already made it, even though like
Hmm.
I wasn't making hardly any money.
Hmm.
But the teachers are like, yeah, keep doing that. Like, we're going to back you on that. And I'm like, all right, cool. So they ended up letting me pass, but back to Canyon. Call Canyon. I'm like, hey, dude, like, I'm interested in coming to the power plant. You probably don't know who I am, but Shannon, friends with Matt and Jeff. They said that you're really cool. Lodi's my boy. He takes care of me. And at the time, Toad was on there too, Kurt. I was like, Toad. And I was like, he's like, I know who you are. He's like, I've watched a lot of your stuff on Music City Wrestling. I'm like, what? Okay, that's pretty cool. He's like, nah, you're great. You're a great cruiserweight. He goes, but the power plant's full right now. He's like, there's just not a spot for you. And I'm like, well, can you keep me in mind and like get back to me if something opens up? And he's like, yeah, I got your number. Like, just keep in touch. So I'm like, all right, that's cool. So I was at home and all right, I was just sitting at home. I can't. I think I was working on a tape actually to send out like to Japan or something. And um, all of a sudden, I get a phone call from Chris Canyon just out of the blue. It's literally like the next day, and I'm like, hello, and he's like, Shannon Canyon. I'm like, oh hey dude, what's up, man? Like, how you doing? I was like, what's he calling me for, And he's like, dude, you're not gonna believe this. I'm like, what? He goes, Eric Bischoff just gave me the power to hire 21 cruiserweights for this idea that we got. And I'm like, oh, really? That's cool. He goes, yeah, you're hired. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, you fit the role like perfect. It's so crazy you called me yesterday. I'm like, okay. So what? He goes, give me your address so I can send you a contract. And he's like, I need to call you back today. And I'm like, all right, cool. So then, back then, like we had actual,
Hmm.
I don't even know what you call them anymore. The voice machine. What is it called?
Fax or
Not a fax. Something you would check your voicemails on.
like
What
a
are they called?
pager, a beeper.
No. What is it? Oh my God, I can't even remember. That's how old I am, man. Nah, but anyways, I had a voicemail from Canyon, or I left my number. I left a message on there going like, because I was going over at Matt's that day and Jeff's to do something, and I was like, hey, this is Shannon. If you need to reach me, because I don't even think I had a cell phone then. Um, you can reach me here, and I gave the house line for Matt and Jeff's house.
Hmm.
So then, I'm over at Matt and Jeff's, and Canyon called me, and he's like, hey, dude, it's, Canyon, like, like, what number is this? And I'm like, well, I'm over at Matt and Jeff. He said, oh, okay, cool. Tell him. I said, hey, he's like, hey, you got your contract. It's on the way. It's in the mail. And I'm like, what? Like, you haven't even seen me wrestle live, like, and you're just gonna send me, you're gonna send me this contract? And he's like, yeah, 75,000, and um, he goes, the details at the end of the contract. Just go over it. And I'm like, all right, cool. So, like I'm 18, just got $75,000 contract. I'm like, hey Matt, that was Canyon. My contract's in the mail. And Matt's like, dude, that was a joke, right? Like, I'm like, nah, that was Canyon. Like, it's not a joke. Like, I left your number on my answer machine. That's the word I was looking for. And he called and that was him on the phone. I was like, I got a contract. He's like, all right, cool. So then, then I just sit home for literally 2, 3. I sit home long enough to make enough money to pretty much buy my first house cash. That's how long I sit home. And I didn't know what was going on, from that point. That's just how I got hired. And I'll get into the rest of the story as we go.
So as you get signed to WCW, what was that transition like when you start actually going working these tapings and you've made it?
Yeah, so the first, it's funny. I about got fired before I ever really did anything on TV. So I get signed. I sit home for probably, man, a good probably 3 months, 2 to 3 months, and just I'm making money, but at the same time I'm going, what's going on here, Um, and then I finally get a phone call from Canyon, and Canyon's like, hey dude, Bischoff wants you to come down. I think they were in Atlanta, maybe. I think that's where Nitro was going to be. And he's like, Bischoff wants you to come down. He wants you to, to wrestle. We want to see you wrestle live finally. I'm like, all right, cool. And he's like, who do you want to wrestle? And I was like, oh, Rey Mysterio. He's like, anybody other than Rey Mysterio? I was like, all right, Billy Kidman. He's like, Shannon, you're wanting to jump right in and wrestle our top stars. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, who can you bring to wrestle? And I was like, oh yeah, man, I got, like obviously me and Shane, like we were going to Nashville together because he was part of the Backstreet Boys thing, and so I was like, yeah, like Shane Helms, what about Shane? So anyway, Shane ended up going with me. Long story short, we wrestled in front of him live, and at the time, like Shane was a little older than me, and I think what they were looking for was cruiserweights that were legitimately, you know, looked like they were 21 years old or younger,
Hmm.
because they were gonna do. It was gonna be a version of Tough Enough. Like I think Bischoff had that idea way before, like WWE did it. Um, and they were going to do like a Road Rules. I don't know if you remember that
Hmm.
show, but they were going to do like a mixture of Road Rules, and put 21 cruiserweights that were like 21 years old and younger, I think 18 to 21, in a house, and film us living together and like training to like eventually be on Nitro. Um, and that's the idea that was presented by Canyon to me. I still haven't talked to Bischoff. I see Bischoff every once in a while, but I don't know what Bischoff's big vision was for it. But like I'm pretty sure that's what it was. It was going to be like a Road Rules type reality show. Um, so that's the first time I actually wrestled in front of him, and then Shane ended up getting hired. From going down, and they seen Shane work, and they're like, "Yeah, he's great. We want to hire him too as part of the package." So me and Shane were like the first two that they picked up for the idea.
That's a pretty cool idea that he had, especially for back then, before all the
Yeah,
tough enough and with the road rules, and that would have been a really good concept, I feel.
yeah, yeah. It was especially for that time because you got to think like which when 3 count comes into play. I mean, you all the reality shows were just hitting on MTV real hard, and then you had like Britney and Timberlake, like that crew was like really like starting to kill it touring and their albums and stuff. So it was definitely the right time for that idea.
Absolutely. Is there any particular moments in WCW that stand out more than others?
Um, WCW was great. It was such a learning experience for me. um, yeah, like I remember my first Nitro. Like whenever I showed up to Nitro for the first time, like I was terrified, man. Like I'm 18, maybe just turned 19
Hmm.
by the time I hit Nitro, and I'm going down there and like these legends. You got Sting, Hogan, Jarrett's down there. You got there's big stars at that point. Like it was people that I've been watching, man, and like they were legends in the business. And I remember walking in the first day and like I was like almost terrified, and walked into the locker room, and the first person that greets me is Sting, right? Like,
Hmm.
but he jumps out like from behind a wall or something. He's like, "Hey kid," and he's got his bat and he's in full makeup, and he's like, "Welcome." And I was like, "Cool, thanks, dude." Like, Sting, you know what I mean? Like, still, I'm a fan of Sting, so it's like, damn, this is Sting. I was like, "Hey man, Shannon Moore, like nice to meet you. Like I'm happy to be here, man. Like I don't know how I'm here, but I'm here." And he's like, and he offered help right up front. Like and that's one thing I remember was, and it continued to like see, like he always offered help,
Hmm.
which is incredible. Especially now looking back at everybody that I've worked with and those people that claim to be legends. And it's like, for me, I feel like a legend is somebody, like, yeah, you're good in the ring. You're a big star, but
Hmm.
like to me, a legend's what you do outside the ring too, and what kind of person you are. And I hate whenever people refer to themselves as legends, whenever they're, like, yeah, you're a legend in the ring, but you're really a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And that, like, that's one thing I can say is like there's a handful of people that deserve that legend title, that Hall of Fame title, inside and outside of the ring. And Sting, I can say, is like one of those guys. Like he from day one, like I'll never forget. And I still get chill, like I get chill bumps like telling the story just because like of all people that could be like a horrible person,
Mhm.
like Sting, he has the rights to be that, I guess, if he wants to.
Mhm.
But from day one, he like totally set the pace of like, oh wow, like that's a role model, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Or that's somebody that I looked up to, and he ended up being like even a better
Mhm.
person. So like that was cool. That stood out to me that first trip. And then here's another story too. Like like it's no secret. Like I had issues like with substance abuse like later on in my career, but I just look back and I've even joked about this before about me starting to drink. Like I didn't drink hardly or do a lot whenever I went to WCW, and I remember that first Nitro, man, like Kevin Nash and Kurt Hennig and Scott Hall, like you know business happens at the bar. Like that was the way that I was brought up. Like you go to the bar, you talk business, and like that's how the boys get to know you, and this, that, and the other. So I walk in the bar that night after Nitro, and Kevin Scott and Kurt like they're at the bar, and you're having a few beers, and they're like, what I'm like, hey, Shannon, nice to meet you guys. Like me and Shane were just here hanging out. And Shane was with me, and they're like, yeah, come here, hang out with us, man. And like they just started ordering, Jack Daniels, and like I wasn't a drinker, man, so started pounding Jack Daniels, man. I got really sick and like had to go to the bathroom, throw up, and I kept drinking. And I remember like the next or that night, like laying down in bed before I caught my flight home the next day, going, man, I got to go home and learn how to drink. This is gonna be brutal. And I did. I went home and I remember like I couldn't even buy alcohol at the time, so I was like, I had a buddy that was 21. I was like, man, you got to go buy me some beer and liquor because I need to drink this week so I can like get the hang of this because I don't want to look like an idiot like hanging out with the boys. And so I went home and I had to start learning how to drink alcohol at that point because I felt like an idiot whenever throwing up everywhere.
As as WCW was coming to an end, was there any as it was coming to an end, when that final Nitro, what was your reaction? Did you know that you were going to WWE, or did you not know anything?
No, I think I was blind like majority of the roster was. Same story. I'm sure you've heard. Like walking in, you got the signs that said WWE one way, WCW the next way, and I just remember I thought it was a joke or a rib.
Hmm.
That somebody in the locker room was pulling like just messing with everybody. So I just kind of laughed about it and just went in the catering and they're like, nah, this is real. And then, like I was scheduled for Nitro that night. Like they booked me. It's like a 6 man or something. I think I was in with Ray and Evan. Can't remember who all else. I think Jamie maybe and Shane. No, Shane was doing something different, but I think Jamie is part of it. But we were booked that night for that Nitro, that specific um, that night that everything happened. So I felt a little safe because I'm like, well, maybe if they were going to fire me, they wouldn't have put me on the show tonight.
Hmm.
But then on the flight home, I was flying home and just I remember looking out the window, just like, well, I had a good run. Like it was, I guess my career's over now. Because Tom Pritchard told me previously, like it's a land of giants, and it just started to shift a little bit by that point, but
Hmm.
still was like a big man's game. Even though the cruiserweight division and stuff was starting to, you know, um, come about around that time. Um, but yeah, dude, I thought I was gone. I thought I was fired. I was like, man, they'll never pick up my contract. Like, there's, 60 guys on the roster that's bigger than me, and it's like, why would they pick me up?
Hmm.
But yeah, whenever after I was home for a couple of days, I get a phone call from Johnny Ace, and he's like, "Hey kid, we can pick your contract up. You're gonna have your first meeting with JR. I think it was in Atlanta. You're gonna fly down, and you're gonna meet with JR in a hotel, and he's just gonna talk about what's next." I'm like, "All right, that's cool." Then like I think I went out to a club or something the night before and missed my flight to go meet JR, and I was like, "I'm definitely fired now. Like, there's no way they're gonna keep me." So I called Johnny. I'm like, "Hey, Johnny, I missed my flight." He's like, "Did he cut a promo on me?" Like, just got yelled at me. He's like, "What are you thinking? Like, you an idiot?" I was like, "Dude, I don't know what happened, man. Like, I didn't tell him I was out partying the night before, but I was like, man, I just overslept." And so I thought, definitely now, like, I'm done. Like, I'm gonna fly down. JR's gonna say, "Hey, thanks for coming, but we don't need you no more." Um, and I think JR took that like personal.
Mhm.
Like, me and JR, like, we got along, but like we never had that real deep relationship like I had with a lot of, like The Office or, like Johnny Ace.
Mhm.
I think it was just that presence that was set from day one because it was like I knew I'd mess up. And like as soon as I walked in, so I get to Atlanta finally, and I go into my meeting, and JR's on the phone. Like I knock on the door. He's like, "Come in," and I walk in. He's like, "Give me a minute." He's on the phone, and he gets off. He's like, "That's Mick Foley. You know Mick Foley?" I was like, "Yeah, I know Mick." He's like, "Yeah, hell of a guy." I was like, "Yeah, he is." I was like, "Mick's awesome, man. Like I love Mick." And he's like, "All right, well, um, why'd you miss your flight?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, like it was a mistake." And then all he said was like, "All right, well, we're gonna build our cruiserweight division. You're gonna be one of our players, and I'm glad you come down." I was like, "That's it." So that's pretty much it. And then I left. And then I just sit home, man, for I don't know, a good another couple of months, and I'm like, "What is going on?" And then I think it was Blue Meanie or Jasmine St. Clair that hit me up about a tour in Europe that they were going to go on.
Mhm.
And, like, they're like, "We got this tour." I think it was like a 3 or 4 week tour. And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to go on it, man." I can't remember the exact details of the tour, but I remember I called JR because, like, at that point, like, I was just sitting home and, riding dirt bikes and street bikes and jet skiing and doing all this stuff. And then I was like, man, I need to get back to work. Like, I'm not going to be in shape.
Mhm.
I called JR and I'm like, "Hey, Blue Meanie and Jasmine St. Clair, like, they're doing this tour. Would it be okay if I go on this tour just to keep the ring rust off?" And he's like, "Well, hold that thought. I got something I might want you to do." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, and me, I'm thinking like, all right, cool. I'm gonna hopefully get pulled up to TV and start something, or
Mhm.
at least start going to TV. So he calls me back and he's like, "Hey, kid, we're shutting down Memphis and we're opening HWA in Cincinnati. Les Thatcher is going to be running it. We're going to be doing TVs in Louisville. And then, this is going to be a new developmental territory for us. And Les is going to be running it." He's like, the way it was presented, I thought I was going up there to help train.
Mhm.
So, like, the information was completely given to me, like, wrong. Like, it wasn't presented as, "Hey, you're going to a developmental territory to be
Mhm.
developed for TV." It was, "Hey, you're just going to go train and help others." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Like, that's no problem. I'll be gone for a couple of weeks. Cool." So at the time I was engaged, man, I told my fiance, I was like, "Hey, I'm rolling out for a couple weeks. I got to go to Cincinnati." Like, just like I said, I had my house and all that stuff already set up. I was like, "Do you mind taking care of the house? And I'll be back in a few weeks. Like, I'll fly you up to see me in a week and a half." And she was like, "Yeah, cool, go." So I packed enough clothes for, a couple of weeks and I rolled out, man. And lo and behold, a year later, it took a year before I packed for 2 weeks and stayed gone a year. That's kind of yeah, that was my intro to how the first part of this worked, and then like the rest is history from there. Like, the best time of my life. I'm so glad that I went because I didn't know how to wrestle at
Mhm.
that point. Like, I was. It's funny because I wrestled the style then that I feel like is has come around now, like
Mhm.
to what wrestling is now, right? So, and then whenever I went to HWA, like Les, he taught me a lot, man. Like, first thing he taught me was, like a little humbleness.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember walking in, oh God, because, like, I didn't know Les didn't really care for Scott Hall at that point, but I'm pretty sure he didn't care for Scott Hall. Um, And I just remember I rolled in and I had shorts and I had my high techs on. And, like high techs were boots that wrestlers wore back in the day for those that don't know. But, you'd leave them unlaced and like the laces would hang down. And, like just, so like I roll in because this is just how I dress by this point. And, I remember Les is inside, everybody's in the ring, and I walk in, and Les goes, "Oh, look, it's Scott Hall." Just like, I guess that's how Scott would dress. And I just kind of laughed it off. And but it was definitely a dig now. Like, he was basically going, "Oh, look at this jackass. Like, come in here, Scott Hall. Like, he's cool. Like, you know what I mean?" But it was funny. I just remember that little, back and forth. But then, like, Les greeted me and like hugged me and said, "Oh, welcome." It's just a little terrifying too because I was young, man. Like, um, and that point too, like my dad, he was paraplegic by this point, and I was helping him, like with my dad too, and he lived right up the road from me. So like leaving that situation to go to HWA was, it was hard. It was hard for me to do that, especially for a year, to stay on a year.
I couldn't imagine to be able to keep your mind focused
Yeah,
the whole time.
yeah.
Is there any particular moments in HWA that stand out? HWA is like the forgotten territory. It seems like.
Dude, that tape library. I can't believe that WWE hasn't like tried to buy that tape library
Hmm.
for the network, or like have you got, who's got that? Do you have it, or who
I
who
have
has it?
some. Yeah, I have some. I release a match every Sunday. I've
Yeah,
got.
like I know you were sending me stuff. Um, but yeah, dude, like that tape library is a gold mine.
Hmm.
Like, they haven't reached out to you or Les or anybody?
Not that I know of, and it's like the only ones that they. That's why I started this podcast. Is there's so many people in developmental, but they just focus on four names, and there was so much more than that. And then they bought the other libraries, and they don't. They just sit on it. They don't use it. They don't put it out. I don't understand why they don't. Why
Yeah,
own it if you're just gonna sit on it? I don't. I don't know.
yeah. Well, like even somebody, like Tony Khan, like, or anybody that's gonna do any kind of streaming service,
Hmm.
like, should want it. Like, because there's a lot of good stuff on there, man, from the early days of, a lot of the guys, Umaga and Rosie and, Charlie Haas and, the Haas brothers and me, Evan, then Stevie Richards, everybody that would come through. Like, it
Hmm.
was that, man. Like, it was, yeah, that's a good tape library. I can't believe that nobody's wanted to try and grab that.
Now, how long you were in there for a year? You said. Did they close it down shortly after you left?
Yeah, it was right at a year. That was about, once I left, that's when they shut it down, I believe. Dude, so, oh God, you talking about memories of HWA? That was one of the best times from a career standpoint, from a learning aspect.
Hmm.
Probably the most chaotic college experience I've ever experienced. I call it college because that was the way HWA was.
Hmm.
It was like we went in, we put the work in, and then we just party.
Hmm.
And I'm not talking about, we partied hard. Um, Dude, we took over an entire apartment complex. Like, I don't know if I'm sure you've heard some of the stories about that, but you know, one wrestler started banging somebody that ran the apartment complex, and then, next thing you know, like we're getting, how the boys are, like we're trying to get free stuff and free housing and like trying to work every angle we can. And we we all ended up in this apartment complex, and it was just shenanigans every day. And the club scene, fights, like I've never been in so many confrontations in my life except for that year. And like Umaga, living with Umaga, and 9/11 happened that year. Then we lost a couple of the boys. Russ Haas passed away while we were there. Man, I mean, it was just so much happened in that year. It was like, what happened up there? Like that, it was so chaotic. You had, random girls, popping up with other guys' babies, and like just, it was so chaotic. And I was like, I just remember leaving there and like looking back, and like I still talk to Jamie Noble, and we'll talk, we'll start talking about HWA, and it's like, dude, we're lucky we made it out of there alive. Because like, I mean, there was just me and Jamie, like we lived together, and I'll tell you, this is just how crazy it was. So I came home once I realized I was gonna be there for a while, and like, I've always had guns and like cool guns and big guns and small. Like I love guns. Um, so I took a couple of guns so I could shoot while I was up there on the range, and I just remember this is probably the month and a half into it, and I was in there. I was taking a shower, and I come out, and Jamie had, I think it was my Tech Nine. It was like a machine gun outside. We were in a hotel then. I think we were in the extended stay on the balcony trying to shoot billboards. Like we're in Cincinnati. Like it's daylight. It's like we just didn't care. Like we were untouchable. We thought we were. And Jamie was him and Johnny the Bull. They were probably my running buddies there. And if you know Johnny Stamboli
Mhm.
back in the day, and if you know Jamie back in the day, and me, it's like we played by no rules. And like from the at that point, like women to guns to, and I seen Charlie Haas not long ago. We started talking about some of the HWA stories, and we were driving down the road to Louisville one time, and it was Charlie had this white Jeep, and he had I think Umaga, and Umaga was in the passenger seat. Charlie was driving. I think Charlie's girlfriend was with him, and then somebody else was in the back seat. And like I said, I always had guns with me, and like so I sit out. I'm in the car. I'm driving. I think Jamie's probably driving. I'm in the passenger seat, and I sit out of the window, and I got my button. I got my Tech Nine. And I'm just shooting rounds over the top of Charlie's Jeep as we're going down the interstate. Like and Charlie's trying to speed up. He's trying to slow down. He's going, "What are you doing?" And like just like random, like so you just don't do that. It's like who does that? You know what I mean? It's like what if one of the bullets actually, what if I shot Charlie or his tires out or whatever? And it's like just the shenanigans that year, man. Like we all are lucky that we're not in prison.
Now, when it came time to go to the main roster, was there any initial plans, or was it always to bring you up the way that they did?
No, it was honestly out of the blue. Chris Benoit was a main factor, I think, in me getting pulled up. He had seen a lot of the cruiserweight stuff that me and Jamie and like Chad Collier were doing, and Jamie got pulled up first, and then they pulled me up to do house shows with Jamie. And at first, I think Chris would do stuff just to entertain him, because
Hmm.
like we'd go out, man. We were trying to do like early Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero stuff, or like Eddie Dean. Like that's kind of the style that me and Jamie were shooting for. Like whenever we first got up on the road with Chris, and Chris would always come to us. He's like, "Man, you got to lay it in. Come on, like I want you guys to like you guys need to go out there and you need to lay it in." And it's like, I mean, we were punching each other as hard as we could. Like it was every night. Like we'd come back. And I'm like, Jamie, my teeth are about to fall out. And he's like, yeah, dude, my nose is broke. Like we can't, and we're going like we can't keep killing each other.
Hmm.
Like, and every time Chris is like, that was great. That was great. So like he's pumping us up, and like now we've set this standard that we're trying to make sure that whenever we come back, Chris likes it.
Hmm.
And it was like that for a long time, like where we were doing house shows together, and then Chris was like, "You gotta lay it in harder. You gotta lay it in harder." And it's like, and finally we're like, "Chris, like, dude, we're tired. Like, you're killing us, man. Like we're, like my teeth are about to fall out. Like Jamie's nose is broke. He can't hear in his ears. Like we're messed up." And then like he's like he finally laid off a little bit, and like just he was still watching critique our matches, but it was just funny because I think he loved to see us just out there just killing each other. That's I started house shows first until I started getting eased into like velocity and stuff like that.
Hmm. Is there any particular WWE moments that stand out more than the rest?
Um, Probably WrestleMania at Madison Square Garden, like that was probably whenever I think about success or accomplishing everything that I wanted to accomplish. Like I never was a title guy because like hey, it's fake, it's entertainment. So like I just early on I kind of didn't understand why people would get so upset about winning titles. I mean, I got the money. If you're champion, you're gonna make more money because you're doing more shows and you're doing PR and you're getting paid more. Like I understood it, but at the same time, that's not what I set out to accomplish in wrestling was to win the world title.
Hmm.
Mine was to obviously make it and then to be in the biggest events of in wrestling. And
Hmm.
like WrestleMania was obviously the NFL of wrestling. So I'm like, man, if I could just say that I made it to the, NFL or WrestleMania, that would be cool. So then, like I think I was part of four WrestleManias. I think two or three of them was on the main show. And then I did a couple of like rumbles and stuff before WrestleMania started or whatever they would call the pre-show of Mania. So like I accomplished my goal, and then the fact that I was part of the that cruiserweight open at Madison Square Garden whenever Dragon came in, that was really cool. That was a moment where I was like, okay, like I accomplished everything I wanted. I wrestled in WrestleMania at Madison Square Garden. It's like it's never gonna get any bigger than that for me because like
Hmm.
that's it just nostalgia wise like how are you gonna beat that?
Yeah.
So like, for me, that's I knew I did something, and like I was for me and myself, I was like, okay, like I'm good now. Like that's my career. Whatever happens from here on, like I don't really care, because like I finally accomplished what it was that I set out to do.
Yeah. How has life been after WWE?
It's been great, dude. Um, I think because now like dude, I got so much going on now because like I work with pro athletes now whenever it comes to helping them get sober.
Hmm.
I work with other wrestlers. I work with the NFL, Major League Baseball. Like I've worked with all kinds of different clients, doctors, lawyers, but I focus on athletes just because I feel like until I kind of hit a bad point in my life, I defined myself as a pro wrestler because
Hmm.
that's all I knew. I kind of pigeonholed myself, and I feel like that a lot of people do that. And whenever it comes to the business, like we're taught, especially in the era that I come up in, that you eat, breathe, and sleep pro wrestling.
Hmm.
Like there's nothing else that should matter to you,
Hmm.
and pro wrestling comes first. So like that's just kind of how I was brought up in the business. And I did that, and I sacrificed my family, I sacrificed my health, I sacrificed everything for the company that I was working for.
Hmm.
And now, like looking back, it's I'm like, man, like I wish that I would have found that balance. I wish that somebody could have taught me that before I even went on the road, like with the
Hmm.
major organizations, because I feel like I cheated myself in so many ways. Um, like yeah, financially, like wrestling was great, but as far as growth as a man, like I feel like the business can sometimes like eat us up and define us as a pro wrestler, which causes later, whenever you're not with that company, you get fired. Like you go through this identity crisis to where you're like, man, like who am I?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm not WWE superstar Shannon Moore, WCW superstar Shannon Moore. So like, what do I do now? You know what I mean? Like people
Hmm.
aren't, they're not gonna like me. People aren't. I'm not gonna have no friends no more. Because you realize too, like whenever you get released or you get fired or you quit, like the first time I got fired, I was there for a few years, and then I get my release, and it's like you're waiting for the phone calls, but you're not. You're like, man, okay, like this sucks. Like this family that you know that everybody says like, oh yeah, we're family, we're the boys, we got each other's back, we love each other, and we take care of our own. Then you get fired, and it's like there's no phone calls come in. Then
Mhm.
you realize pretty quick like who is truly there for you, who's truly your friend, who's not. And it's like I had to learn a lot of hard lessons like
Mhm.
that because you got to think too, man. I was a kid, you know, um, since 9 years old. Like I was in this journey that was basically teaching me to be a wrestler, how to act as a wrestler, but I never grew as Shannon Moore
Mhm.
because I was a wrestler, and that's all I cared about. And I wish I never, I wish I, looking back now, like it's like, man, I wish I knew then what I know now.
Mhm.
But I feel like it would have helped me in so many ways, like from a success standpoint. Like I could have did so much other stuff if I wouldn't have pigeonholed myself and just tried to be the wrestler only.
Mhm.
And, I didn't learn that till I'm 37 years old, like I went through some struggles in my life, and then I meet some people like I finally, because I wouldn't be a friend to nobody that wasn't in the business,
Yeah.
unless it was like a childhood friend. If you wasn't a wrestler, we wasn't friends because, like, and a lot of it was probably my ego, man, because like, wrestling breeds egos.
Mhm.
I mean, and it just does. Is you breed people that think that they're better than everybody else because they got an opportunity, and then you define yourself by like, well, I have this much money in the bank, so it makes me better, and it basically just breeds a bad ego.
Mhm.
And and it's not that people set out to go like, hey, I'm gonna have this ego and this chip on my shoulder, and I'm just gonna be a shitty person. Like that's not, because I thought I was a decent person. I was always nice to people that come to watch me wrestle and all that stuff. But after doing some soul searching, I realized like, man, like pro wrestling has, like bred this ego that I have that wouldn't allow me to even venture into other areas
Mhm.
of, business or, so, you know, until I opened my first tattoo shop and I tried something like out of the box that I had passion for, but wouldn't never really do it because I was like, man, this is gonna make people have the impression that I'm not fully in on wrestling. I'm trying
Mhm.
to do other business ventures, which that's a horrible mentality to have, right? Because it's like your best friend or your wife or husband dying. Like you somebody or this career and that's all you know, and then all of a sudden it's gone. It's like, oh wow, what's next? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So like I feel like the business definitely like kind of pigeonholed me to not venture out and really learn who I was as Shannon Moore.
I'm glad that things are different now, and I just want to say thank you for what you've done for professional wrestling and what you continue to do. Where can people reach out to you at?
Oh, dude, at the Shannon brand on Twitter, Shannon Moore on Facebook, hit me up. I'm on Instagram. I think, Shannon Moore on Instagram. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I get so much social media, I don't keep up with. I don't even remember what I named and stuff. But, or like something I want to touch on too, man, if you got a second, is
Yeah.
just mental illness and like, um, drug abuse, substance abuse. Like we live in an era today, I think in 2023, where like substance abuse and mental illness, like it's not that black sheep no more. That's not talked about,
Mhm.
and I think it's really important. And that's something now. Like I just went to Philly a couple of weeks ago and did some service work up there, and it's called a night of recovery about substance abuse, and like we're gonna tour with it hopefully coming up. But if there's anybody out there that's struggling, man, like get a hold of me. Um, you know, I went through it myself. I went through the whole, like substance abuse deal where, like I was physically addicted, man, and I couldn't wake up every day and feel normal unless I took some sort of substance. And I didn't know how to get help. I didn't know how to reach out for help. And like that's something that whenever I do seminars now, if I'm out wrestling, is like just letting people know, like, hey, you have to ask for help, like if you're going through this, because that's the only way you're gonna come out on the other side of this. And like we're losing way too many people that just they feel like there's no hope on the other side of this thing.
Hmm.
Whether it's, and I'm not talking about just wrestlers or pro athletes. Like I'm talking about anybody that watches this. So you have to ask for help. And if there's nobody you feel comfortable around you, you got to find somebody that you can ask for help and get to a facility, man, and like learn about substance abuse and what it truly is, because it's a way bigger picture than what most people know. Because most people think it's a choice,
Hmm.
and that somebody has a choice to wake up every day and take a substance or not. It's like, yeah, that sounds easy, but when you get physically addicted or you're dealing with some mental illness, it's like you have to treat that. And there's methods to treat it, but it takes a while to learn, and you have to learn the tools that you need to be able to do it.
Hmm.
And I just like I can't say it enough. Like ask for help, and like sooner than later, because nobody deserves to tear your life apart um, because of a substance that
Hmm.
they're hooked on. So, gas chamber tattoo at gmail.com. If you're struggling with anything like that, and you need some guidance, hit me up. Um, you know, free advice, man. Like I'll try to help where I can, but yeah, man.
If there's anything I can do to help promote anything you've got going on, feel free to reach out. Uh, I think it's really good what you're doing and to help people. There's not enough good people in the world anymore.
Yeah, dude, it's I tell you, man, like I'm fortunate. Like I work for a treatment center. It's called Riverside Recovery of Tampa. It's one of the biggest, nicest treatment centers in Tampa. Um, our team is phenomenal. Like I work with, doctors, lawyers, psychiatrists, and imagine that too, right? Like sometimes I'm sitting in meetings with doctors and therapists, and like sometimes I'm sitting there and going, "What am I doing here?" Yeah, because I'm in there with pictures on my face and all tattooed up, and like, like they're asking me for advice and stuff, and it's like, hold on, like, what am I doing here? What is this? But it's cool, man. I love it. I have a passion for it. Like I said, right, we went up to Philly and we did a night of recovery. It's basically a talk. There's some other wrestlers that were on it. Dirty Dango actually, he did the uh, he did the night of recovery with us, and they invited me up. It went really good. So now we're trying to tour with it, man, because like we're trying to put people into treatment, trying to get people help. So if we can get some sort of national tour going with that, like I think it's really gonna spread some awareness and hopefully be able to save a few lives. I mean, so that's what we have going on going forward. That's kind of where my focus is at. Is getting that night of recovery on tour with those guys, and from there, man, like. Dude, I'm doing jiu-jitsu. Like I'm trying to hopefully do a tournament next year. Like I got an opportunity to open a pro wrestling school here. But
Mhm.
like I got my podcast and all this stuff going, man. But I'm just like I don't have enough time. I need 8 more hours in the day, like we were talking about earlier. But
Absolutely. And feel free to reach out to me to help promote anything you've got going on. I'd be more than happy to.
cool, man. Appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate your time today.
All right, have a good
Thank
day.
you.